That's on both sides.
So there is a, the Senate Bill 942 that has an exemption, and where one can do an affidavit. Now, I know I did get a copy of that based on something that's already, in their records and so forth, and you just, got to give back to them what they put out, and I guess they bank on most people not knowing.
Now, isn't it even the fact that that would be presented as an issue before the people shows you that they have been deceiving the people and negligent, because the people should have already known those things, shouldn't they?
Yeah. So
because that's called established law, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So that means they have not been operating on established law, doesn't it? So that means they were knowingly defrauding the people, haven't they been?
Right.
So when people become active, what does it do? It forces their hand and exposes them, and therefore they have to justify what they have been doing, distinguish from what they have not been doing. And in the process, it also exposes the opportunists that have been among our own too, doesn't it?
Right.
Well, that's why we're having this conversation.
But I'll be happy, this was sent to me. It needs a little cleaning up, just grammatically, but definitely would make it available. And I think, thank Brother Truth for that document. And but I just need to clean it up just a little bit grammatically. But it's based on established
law, which means that's the law.
There's law.
See, so if it's not that, it's not the law, is it?
True.
So we've been living under a lawless regime, thinking that they were government, haven't we?
Yes.
And we've been paying taxes to them, mandatory under the guise of voluntary, haven't we? Which is absolute contradiction, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So we have been operating or serving a criminal organization of parasitic exploiters, thinking they were legitimate government. But the people believed in them, didn't they? Mm-hmm. This is why a lot of the processes or things that I've been saying over the years I've done or said or produced, but I also told the people, and I always qualified it by saying some of the things we're doing now will not be doing later. Why? Those were chess moves. To force the hand, to cause them to expose themselves. Because remember, when you lose faith in them, they lose their power, because they are parasites and vampires. And they can't live without blood sucking you, whether it is physical, which they do, or abstract, which they do.
Here's another question from Jason Meady. How much power do Freemasons have over the nation?
You must understand that Freemasons, as a fraternal club, is an abstract of them studying you and studying your culture. However, Masonry is cosmology, astrology. It is African culture, or sometimes referred to as Moorish science. They have been using the negative, or what you call the lower self energies. So it's like the point of comprehending, where sometimes when you hear us say, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, but get some comprehension of what you're dealing with so that you can make discernment. Because remember, one of the things that they have practiced doing is impersonating or doing things in other people's names. So understand, while they may use Masonry to cover up their frauds, etc., in divine order, Masonry simply means mother's son. And all you sons out there that got a belly button, you were born a Mason. However, doesn't mean you're dark side. So you must know the distinction between the higher self and the lower self, pardon me, and aspire to those positive principles of both justice and jurisprudence, which we have not been doing because we've been operating under the black codes. That's the dark side. So by your will and intent, you must drive or direct or navigate your life with what they will call the carpenter's tools, sometimes referred to as the compass for radius and the square for conduct. That's what that's about, you all. It's also referred to as isonomy. So don't learn to hate yourself because hybrid Europeans have misrepresented African, or what they refer to as Egyptian culture.
And the thing that I've learned about, and I was listening to the sister yesterday, and we were listening today about that one, what you need to really look into when you're looking at who they are and what they've been doing are, believe it or not, the archons. You know, remember that sort of like the what's behind the shadow,
the dark side.
Yeah. You know, so yeah, but it's, you know, they're not us.
You know, my position has always been to not try to make things complex, but
right.
to deal with what's right before you.
Right.
You know how, like I say, like you say, you know, and I know that there's many metaphysical conversations that we can go into. For instance, like how many craters are on the moon, as an example, the dark side of the moon, the hollow moon. Whenever you're looking at what you call the moon, you're always seeing just one side of it. It doesn't appear to rotate like the Earth, or etc., as they might say, or it's just a light that appears to be the same size as the sun, the visible sun, as you call it.
Sort of like a casting.
Yes. All right. However, my position has always been, before you can talk about mapping the moon, let's talk about mapping Midgard. Meaning that, how dare you claim the knowledge of a God that you do not see when you do not acknowledge your brothers and sisters by the day? Or how can you claim the love of God that you do not see when you don't love the brothers and sisters you see by the day? Thus, in the principle of common sense, common law goes aligned with that in natural law. How can you claim, i.e., to know the laws of the universe or the laws of God, when you don't even know the laws of men, among whom you were given birth?
I get that, but there are a lot.
That's where you get the derivative statement, ignorance of the law is no excuse, because it's based in the knowledge of yourself and the honor of your mothers and your fathers.
I get that, Grand Sheik, but there are, believe it or not, there are many who are aware of a darker other side, and they need to, and those who do need to know how they can use their knowledge and energy,
yes,
to begin to push back and to thwart what's happening.
And I'm agreeing with that, absolutely. And I'm adding to that, much of the approach I've used and have been intending to use is to help get the hybrids off, those vampires off their back, so they're better able to use their common sense and accelerate or ascend into the higher planes of knowledge elsewhere. It's sort of like, let's work on, while we're ascending in our knowledge about the outer world, etc., that we are cognate of conquering the inner world. Don't neglect the one for the other. That's what I'm saying.
Right. That's what I'm saying. It needs to be balanced.
Yes. There we go.
Because you got people at all ends of the spectrum when it comes to this knowing.
Now let's look at this, and I'll give you another example of my reasoning. Look how much economic energy is lost from our communities by taxation alone, by virtue of this misrepresentation that is absolutely in place, and this false taxation that's absolutely in place. Would it not be true? Would it not be true that and I'll show you another point. You know how you'll see a lot of people will attack and criticize me for exposing the truth about property being held in a allodial title prior to 1913, and that these mortgages and liens did not arrive into the political avenues of estate and property at North America until 1913. You notice that coincides with 1913 when Noble Drawley, our prophet, established officially the old Canaanite temple for the redemption of a lost estate. And a lot of people, when you say allodial title, you'll see them getting mad or upset. Why are they upset? Why don't they just tell the truth? What is their motive? What if their motive of going against the truth.
Are we talking about Moors?
Yes. Why are they upset?
Yeah, why would they?
It's not an opinion, that's a fact. Why are they upset? Because once the people get conscious, they'll recognize that they should be on the issue of getting rid of the false de facto venues of artificial debt created by unum sanctum operations, which is the debt pledge mortgages that they've been burdened with. I'm interested in getting those types of things off the people's back while they're ascending in other areas or worrying about what's on the dark side of the moon, if you get the point. You want to go there, you better get some of this weight off your back here.
Here's a question from Eric Ratliff. Grand Sheik, are there any governments on the face of this earth still in alignment with Moorish science, fighting for the people?
Very few. What you have might be surprising to you. Maybe a small faction of people operating in Manchuria, a small faction of people operating in Russia, a small faction of people operating in Afghanistan who just threw them out, a small faction of the Phoenician tribes here in the Western Hemisphere, tagged as quote unquote Indians. Outside of that, very few others. Most of the constructed governments are actually Satanists. Now that's a fact.
Well, you can tell that they're connected because all of them have followed the same mandates from here to all these.
One of the things I want you to notice that as I read to you some of these fundamental principles, you'll see that while these are the established principles, you'll see that they haven't been operating on those principles. That's what I wanted you to take note of. And the fact that the average people are not familiar with what I just shared with you tonight demonstrates that what the obligations are and what they have actually been violating. Because the point of it is you should be very familiar with this stuff if that's what we've been living under. But the fact that we have not been living under it demonstrates that they are criminal and de facto. That was my point of sharing this information. Because you need to recognize that people who are in position of government don't have rights to sell you or to grant you or to give you or to license you by. They only have obligations and duties. Keep that in mind. All of which they've been abridging. They've been trespassing your estates and your birthrights since their existence. Most governments are criminals from the beginning, from their construction. So your blind faith in them has been giving them energy. So you decide what you want to do with this information. Because every man, woman, and child must confess their own worship under their own vine and fig tree. Don't look for us to carry your cross, because that's not going to happen. The Savior will be in you. It's not coming from outside. We're just sharing some information to help us all to get in a more proper state of mind in governing our affairs and our interchanges in trade with each other. For those principles are established anciently.
Here's a question. What are we to do if the de facto government does not respond to motions, notice, demands with quo warranto?
This is why they set up the civil rules of procedure in order to stagnate you. This is what I'm presenting to you. That's why I told you. The civil rules of procedure was designed by them to actually do their corruption with you in the name of stagnating you or denying you justice. Because fundamental constitutional principles are very simple. And all this complication that they have made in the processes, i.e. the procedures, was designed to deny you due process. In fact, while they pretend that that's the way the law goes, no. Those are the operations of their private and foreign human chattel property operations. They are not courts. There have been no courts of justice, as we told you years ago, operating at North America since roughly around 1789.
You know what?
Now, that's a fact.
But specifically, I mean, are there any steps? Is there any remedy to that? I mean, if
the remedies is your activities. Number one, claiming your nationality, getting out of the black codes, cleaning up your status, and then studying the principles of your ancient mothers and fathers, and standing pat and square on those principles while relating to others, i.e., being more cognizant of your obligations to act within the virtues of your higher self and not the lower self upon which they feed. They feed on fear and ignorance, which is what they promote, which is why they're upset whenever you mention words like divine sovereignty, constitutions, etc., i.e. those principles. Because once you start thinking in those directions, you start gravitating to a cognizance of the higher self and relationships of proper government or de jure government, and you would recognize that they are frauds and start rejecting them. Because remember, they are vampires. They live on blind faith, which is why they promote blind faith in both government and dogma under the guise of religion. Because those are tools. They are mind control tools. Keep that in mind. That's a fact. Get used to accepting the fact. You don't want to accept that, then you'll stay in the darkness with them.
So Mercian Freeman asked, what's the jurisdiction we can use to get free access to federal court?
The platforms operating as they are not courts of justice. You will not get it with them. You will get it with yourselves, which is why for years we've always promoted the Moors to activate the principles of Article 3 courts and the courts of diversity of nationality, which is a consular venue, so that you can start qualifying yourselves of reactivating the established law, while those persons who are impersonating government continue their criminality against the people. You must do it. You're the cure.
And so Ram
this is why certain things we've been promoting or teaching. These are chess moves.
Says so only consular courts can enforce our law?
Consular court, because remember the issue is the court is courts of justice. In the issues or in the matters of controversy in diversity, consular court is activated. Consular court does not sit in what you call established structure on its own right. You have courts of justice. The venue would change. And so whenever there's a controversy in diversity, then it becomes consular court. Therefore, you'll be jurisprudence. Your jurisprudence will be in a consular venue that deals with diversity of nationality, i.e. treaty enforcement. And this is why they don't talk in those areas, because they know they've been abridging and violating you on all of those fronts. This is, again, why they have been promoting their so-called black leader guys as civil rights 14th Amendment promoters and trying to get you to agree to be a U.S. citizen Negro, which makes you their stock. This is why many of them have been over the years really upset with Taji guy for exposing these fundamentals, because once you recognize that, you'll recognize that these people who you have trusted have handlers behind them, and they're not your friends.
Chubb Jack says, yes, but how were we conquered? How?
We were conquered by ourselves in many ways, going away from the principles of our ancient mothers and fathers. One of the things that Prophet Noble always told the Moors in relationship to our fall, were our preoccupation with gratifying our lower selves. Don't act like you've been innocent, because you haven't. See, because the principles of divine law don't recognize person or station. So keep that in mind too. So if we go back to those principles of our ancient mothers and fathers, we will begin to be part of the cure and less a part of the problem. will be part of what you call cause and less part of effect, i.e. is called solutions, remedy, responsibility, honor, integrity. Yes, it's not hard. It's just that we must go back to those principles of our ancient mothers and fathers, and we ourselves will start fixing things and get rid of the corruptors around us and the opportunist parasites around us.
So, Tamaray L.
We got to stop playing. We got to stop playing in the innocent victim game, because that's not totally true. We've been exploited, but we ain't innocent. Get over it. Get your ego out of it.
Tamaray L. Bey says, wants you to shed light on that time in history when they were rewriting history and substituting the word Moorish with the false identity of Indian.
It has that. The Indian thing is around 1820 area. And keep in mind, the Indian, there's no such thing in the nature of Indian. So let's get this clear. Let's get this clear from the beginning. So when they're making reference to the Indians of the West, they're talking about the Naga, i.e. the Moors, i.e. and or Dravids. And so when you're talking from their perspective of the reconstructed history, they would imply Sindh, or what you would know for a couple thousand years, Hindustan, i.e. and the Naga, Dravidians, among the Phoenicians that come to the Western Hemisphere with the Canaanites, Moabites, i.e. seeking new homes, which you will see some of that history demonstrated in the Circle 7 Quran, chapter 47. And the term Hindus or Hindus, and keep in mind they don't pronounce the H for Hindustan, they would say Indi, referring to the Moors of the Carib Moors among the Arawak and Taino Moors of the islands area of the Caribbean. And they started calling us Hindus or Naga of the East, of the West. And so this is where it is derived the term West Indies. And then they promoted the word Indies or Indians. And then the practice spread to the north. And so they would refer to the Moors of the Western Hemisphere as Indians. However, no such word exists. They made it up.
And some of them admit that it's a fiction. If you,
it's been adopted as a political social reality. However, it's a false matrix.
It was no different than black and white.
Absolutely. It's just that it's been given what you call political legitimacy
to
make the people think that, if you claim to be Indian, we'll take you within the Bureau of Indian Affairs, which we established to recognize your sovereignty. Yeah. You notice that they have a lot of boxing and a lot of casinos in what they call Indian territories. And then lately they've been taking over all of those entities because they come under the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Sovereign what? We fall for it. If you don't have a knowledge of the real history, you fall for anything. And we've been falling for it. I'm not saying that we haven't been called Indians. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that it's a fraud. And you know it is. You know in your heart it is anyway. It's just that the people keep looking for a benefit and they grab to anything that Rome promises them something. What it actually promotes is divisions among us. It's called divide and conquer. It's called schismata. And it's been working quite well for them to our injury.
So Wellness by Intention asked that I ask you to speak on the application of what you speak, what that has on the Bay Islands and the native Bay Islanders, and what Empress Earthy accomplished by her nationalization?
Same thing. What it does, it creates what you would call, it creates an interruption of the U.S. Treasury bonds, which actually belong to the popes of Rome, etc., which has much to do with the reason why they assassinated her in the hospitals.
But for the...
Because remember, overall, it's the consciousness of the people in relationship to their right of claim that begins to kill the bond system, which is the bondage. The bondage is the system of bottomry instruments that they've created for human trafficking that has been sold as U.S. Treasury bonds from 55 Water Street for these last century. Once you become conscious and you start speaking up publicly and making right of claim, it kills the bonds. You can't capture it, you must choke it. See, you know what they say? The trust and of the United States is what those bonds are built on. When the people lose faith and trust in those instruments, the instruments have no political negotiable power anymore, which is what's happening today in the political realm.
We have a spy fly in here.
Yes.
You can't get him.
Poor fly.
No, he can't.
Just move out the way, Kai.
If you see my hand coming through,
we don't want to. We don't remove him from this plane.
I do.
Let him.
I'll open the door for him. He won't go out.
But anyway, cognizance of what's going on has, because keep in mind, what keeps the vampires' power is you projecting them energy. And a lot of these conversations we have is to get you to willingly stop giving faith to these platforms created by Rome that are in place not to serve you, but to make you their serfs, i.e. connotatively make you their slaves. And it's the fact that we keep on serving and believing in them, having faith in them, that gives them strength. And then also projecting fears of going against that those frauds, which also they feed on. They feed on fear and ignorance. They are parasites. They are vampires. They are exploiters. You must comprehend that that's what's going on here. See, the deal of it is, our people have been groomed in this oppression for so many generations that they actually have been serving the purpose of the vampire operatives by what? By fearing or thinking that someone else outside of themselves must save them. No, it's you. Know yourself.
I heard something very interesting the sister was talking about. And she was talking about the fact that we are batteries, so to speak, their energy. We are energetic batteries. And that one of the reasons, and I found this very intriguing, one of the reasons why they work so hard to put so many of our brothers and sisters in their industrial, camps, their prison industrial system.
Distracted.
Not just
feed off of you.
Because when you put that much tension, anger, fear, frustration in those places, and it happens like that, that's just a mega battery energy source that they draw off like the Lucius.
This is also why,
besides the fact that they use it for cheap labor,
set up what you call zones.
Right. So they're drawing off of the energies.
Isn't that ethereal vampirism?
Yes.
Isn't Roe versus Wade was originally set forth, i.e. to support, i.e. the principles that are promoted by Margaret Sanger and the genocide program, and for what? A blood source and an organ source and what they will call a meat hamburger source in the name of women's rights. Now that's a fact. But look how many women support Roe versus Wade. with the child sacrifice or murder of children guised as women's right of abortion for their bodies so they can keep partying.